Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tutorial 2 in working with Torchmate EDUS. Last time we looked at basic shapes, some alignment methods, welding options to create a basic design or scene. Today we're going to look at using text for design, as well as bringing in a complex design that's not a part of the clip art design, and making it into something we can combine with our basic shapes as well as the text we're going to look at today. So I have Torchmate EDUS opened up just like last time, and one really neat feature is once you've defined the material size, if you use the same computer, same Torchmate EDUS program, the next time you log into it and open it up, it's going to define the material blank automatically to the last size you used. So last tutorial we worked with a 12-inch by 12-inch material blank, and if I open up my material size menu, you can see here that it's defaulted to those same settings. So my origin selection is still in the bottom left corner, and it is a 12-inch by 12-inch material blank. So it's not necessarily a setting that you need to change every single time unless you're needing to change the size of your workspace based on what it is that you're making. So step number 1 for today is we are going to make a frame similar to what we did last time. So we're going to make a 12-inch square, draw it in, set the width to be 12, set the height to also be 12, draw a second shape in, and we're going to define this one as 11 inches in width and 11 inches in height. And then, because these are my only two shapes, instead of using a selection box, I'm just going to hit Control A, which selects all objects on your workspace. So I only had the two squares, so this now selects those two squares. And I'm going to go to my layout menu, choose the arrange and distribute option, and go to align to selected. I'm going to center these two objects vertically, and then back again, layout, arrange and distribute, align to selected, centers horizontally. I'll go to my weld tools now, use the XOR, or removing the overlapping area, to cut the 11-inch square out of the 12-inch square. And that gives me my frame. Now the next step is we're going to simply start adding some text, and we'll see how we can use text in different ways for different designs. So the text tool, this little A icon, we're going to use the first text option, the text compose, which also has a quick command of Control and F7 on your keyboard. So I'm going to click that, and then in my workspace here I'm just going to click to create a starting point for my text. Now the menu at the top has already changed over to mimic a word processing program similar to Microsoft Word. So the first thing we're going to do is choose a font. So with the fonts, I'm just going to move over my preview window and make the selection window a little bit bigger and easier to read. If I bring up all of my fonts here, you can see that this program actually has access to a lot of different fonts. Now, if you don't see fonts, one thing that you'll want to do is go to the File menu, make sure you go down to Install and choose Fonts, and go through the process of installing the fonts by hitting Search Now and then Install All to make sure that the fonts are accessible to this program. And again, this was covered in the setup video at the very start. So again, I'm going to go back here to my text, bring my text in, bring up my text preview and selection boxes, and in my all fonts I'm going to search for Arial type font to begin with, just as a very simple font. Looks nice, crisp and clean. And if you know the name of your font, if you just click on one font type, start typing in the name, it'll actually bring you down in the alphabetical order of your fonts to that font style. So I'm going to use Arial Black actually. I'm going to double click on that, and it's changed my font to that size. I'm going to also change the font height and make sure that it's at 1 inch, which is perfect for right now. And now I'm just going to start typing. So first thing I'm going to type in is the school's name, Shaftesbury. Okay, and that gives me the letters for Shaftesbury. There they are, ready to go. And I'm actually going to play around with just making them a little easier to see over my frame because they overlap a bit. Down at the bottom, I'm actually going to change my layer color. So with the Shaftesbury selected, I'm going to choose this blue. And you'll notice now that it's made Shaftesbury blue. So now I'm going to get my text tool again, and I'm going to repeat the same process, but this time it's going to be a different font. I'm going to look now for a font called Stencil. So type in the name, there's my Stencil font, double click on it to select it, and now I'm going to type in High School. And you can see that that font looks similar but a little bit different. And we'll talk about the benefits of these different styles later. But I'm going to repeat this process a couple more times here. So now I'm going to go again back to my Arial font. And actually at the top, it's going to bring up your recently selected fonts. So I used Arial Black, so I'm going to go back to my Arial Black here again. And I'm going to type in now home of the, and then one more time, click to start some text. I'm going to go back to the stencil, and I'm going to type in Titans. And there we go. We've got the startings of some different fonts here, and we'll talk about the benefits of each of these. So first things first, let's change the size of some of these fonts. So let's choose Shaftesbury first, and let's make sure that the proportional scaling is turned on, so the lock icon is closed. And let's set the width of this. Instead of being 11.5 inches, let's set it down to 11 inches. So it's just fitting inside of our workspace. We'll do the same thing here for High School. Proportional scaling's on, 11 inches. Do the same thing for Home of the, 11 inches. And it's fine, we'll have different height fonts, but we're just going to stick with it because I want to show you the differences in the way these fonts are going to work. So now let's get these fonts located into some spaces here. So let's get Titans first. We'll start at the bottom. So let's get the center nub selected. Let's set the Y to be 0.5, so it's right at the edge of our frame. And let's set the X to be 6 so that it's centered in our 12-inch document. We'll then go to the home of the, and what we're going to do is put that just above Titans. So we're going to match it to this grid line, which if we take that across to our ruler, shows us that that is 3 inches. So that means that Y needs to be set to 3, and our X again is going to be set to 6, and now home of the is right in the center of our frame, and again it's resting right on that 3-inch mark of our grid. Now we'll switch things up. We'll go to Shaftesbury. We're going to do the same thing. This time though we're going to use the top center nub or node. We'll set the X to be 6, and we're going to set the Y. We're going to actually set this a little bit down. So we're going to use this grid line here, which we can see matches to 11, and we'll set Shaftesbury there. Then for High School, again we're going to set X to 6, so it's centered, and we're going to give this a little bit of space. We're going to go kind of halfway between these two grid lines, so that's going to put us at 9.5 inches. Just so we have a little bit of space in between Shaftesbury and High School, but it's not as much space as going down the next grid line. Okay, so now we've got some font set in here. Now let's talk about the differences of these. So first, let's talk about Shaftesbury. Now this Arial font looks really clean, looks really good, and as it stands right here, it's going to work wonderfully. If we cut this out, we're going to have all these letters, but there's nothing connecting the letters to the frame. So if I was going to go and try and cut this out right now, what I would end up with is a bit of a problem, because the Shaftesbury would not be fully connected to my frame. So to do that, I'm going to make a shape, draw this out, and I'm going to make my shape 12 inches so I guarantee it overlaps with my frame in width, and I'm going to set my height to just 1/8 of an inch, so that's 0.125. It's a nice thin line, and all I'm going to do is use my little nodes again. I'm going to set my X to be 6 so I know it's centered, and I'm going to just line it up with my grid line that I put Shaftesbury on at the bottom here, so that's going to be the 10. And I'm just going to zoom in because I can actually see that they don't actually perfectly line up. So I'm just going to bump this up with my up arrow key a few times here until I see that the Shaftesbury overlaps all of the letters. So it's overlapping the Y, the R, all these letters are nicely overlapped. That's good to go. So I don't want to work with the other letters right now. So in order to select this, I would normally drag a selection box around my frame and my letters, but I can't do that without selecting all the other fonts. So an alternative way to select things would be to click on an object, on your keyboard, hold the Shift key, and then click on the other objects you want to select. So I have my frame, I'm going to hold shift, I'm going to hit Shaftesbury, and now that's a part of my selection. And still holding my shift key, I'm going to select that rectangle that I drew. And now with all those three shapes selected, I can weld them together. Before I do that though, the layer colors of shapes that you want to join together or use with the weld tools have to be the same layer color. So I'm going to switch the font to match and be black, same as the frame, and then I'm going to use the basic weld. And that's going to join those letters to that line as well as to the frame. So if I were to cut this out right now, all the letters of Shaftesbury are going to come along with it. And that's going to look great. Now if I do the same trick with high school, let's get a rectangle drawn in here. Let's do the same thing. We'll make it a 12-inch long by 0.125 or 1/8 of an inch high rectangle. Let's put this so that it's right in the middle on our left to right, or our x-axis, by putting 6 as our x measurement. And we'll bump this right to the bottom edge here of high school. And let's put that at about 8.5 inches, just using my eye and matching that to my ruler on the left. 8.5. It's a little high. I think what I'm going to do is actually just bump this down a little bit, do kind of the same thing I did with Shaftesbury, is just eyeball it until I can see that everything's being overlapped by this rectangle. So now that I've got that, I'm going to do the same thing. Select my font, hold my shift key, select my rectangle, still holding my shift key, select my other font, and then I'm going to go ahead and weld this together. Oops, I didn't change my layer color, so it didn't actually bring it together. So I'm going to go undo, take that step back, switch my layer colors back so that they're all the same, and now basic weld, and there they are all connected together. Now sometimes this is going to work great, but one thing I'll show you is if, for example, maybe I wrote Shaftesbury in stencil fox, and I did that same step. Let's have a look at what would happen here. Okay, so we're going to make this 11 inches. We're going to set this in the center. And let's just put this at 7.5 just so we've got it in a position here. Now I don't want you to follow these steps. I'm just showing you what could happen with some designs depending on how your font or what it is that you're typing out looks. So I'm going to put this in the middle. I'm going to put this at roughly 6.5. Same thing, I'm going to just eyeball it. Bump it down so that I have everything overlapping here. And then same thing, I'm going to select Shaftesbury, hold the shift key, select my rectangle, still holding the shift key, select my font. All of these are a black layer color. Join these together and everything's good to go, right? No, if I actually cut this out, you'll look. I'm not sure what school that name that is, but it's not Shaftesbury, because all these connections, and it actually happened with my high school as well, didn't connect when I did my weld. So the problem here is that these now have been kept from joining to my object, okay, because they're not connected. It's called an unbridged font right now. So what I would want to do is select all those little objects and just bump them over until they overlap the rest of the letter, and then with everything selected again, weld them so that they become a part. Oh, and I haven't even still gotten all of them. I missed the S in Shaftesbury here, and I missed part of the T as well. So same thing, I'll take my S, I'm going to bump that over so it overlaps. I'm going to take my segment of the T here, bump that over so it overlaps, select all those, select everything else, and now weld it, and everything should be good to go. There we are. So that's one way of connecting them, but it does make the letter look different, wonky. So as an alternate option for you, what you can do, and I'm just going to actually use the high school because we have it, is I could draw in something to connect this, or I could use that edit tool. So I could just take my nodes here, sculpt this to make it look like it matches, and that could get welded together so it doesn't look as out of place, but I don't have the gap. So again, depending how involved you want to get with this would dictate what you're going to do here. So I could just draw in a small connecting bar to join these together and use that, but again, it doesn't look as good in here, but it is an option to me. So I could do that where I draw these shapes in, select all my objects, bridge them together that way. I could do the method where I just move the object and then join that together. And finally, I could do the option where I take my design, put it into edit mode, move the nodes over, sculpt my line a little bit so it looks a little bit more like it belongs, and then weld that together. So there are some different options, but they're all going to give you different results. Okay, that line doesn't look necessarily in place. The C here with the overlapping connection with the stretched segment, or the unstretched segment being bumped over, makes the C look a little skewed, and then the stretched out S is probably the best looking, but in all honesty, I'd likely want to go down to the bottom of the S as well and just match that same sort of style where I remove the little cutout or the section that makes this unbridged. But then at that point, I'm probably better just to use a font like this Arial that's already all connected together or is all bridged, because I don't have to do any of that extra editing. Okay, now let's look at an opposite option here. So let's take the frame, put it into edit mode by double clicking, and let's take these nodes up a bit. So let's bump this node here on the Y, and let's type in 4.25. Puts it just a little bit above home of the, and we'll do the same thing here for the left node. We'll make it 4.25, and then we'll hit apply again. All it's done is just moved the frame, made this segment thicker. Now let's take home of the, and we'll take the frame, make these the same color. Let's cut these letters out now. Use our XOR weld, and we'll do the same thing here with Titans. We'll make this a black layer color to match the frame, and we'll cut Titans out as well. So we use the same two font choices here. We have home of the in the Arial font. We have Titans in the stencil font. Let's take a look at the differences here. Now if I select this and try to move it, now we have the opposite effect occurring. The Titans is the bridged font that's connected to the frame, and the Arial font is the unbridged font where the centers of the O's in home and of are not connected. So same idea. With the centers here, or islands of the O's, I would have to connect them. So one way of doing that would be to draw a shape. Draw a little rectangle here. Edit that however we need to. Change the width. Bump it over so it's in the middle. And then again, select my shape. Hold the Shift key. Select the center of my O. Select my frame. Basic weld that together. That's connected now. Alternatively, again, I could put the center of my O into edit mode, and what I could do is look to take the center nodes here, bump these up, and I could leave it as that so it's just connected in one section, or I could repeat that process, take some of the nodes from the bottom. This is a note: if you're moving these nodes with your keyboard, if you zoom out, it actually moves faster because it's less distance to travel on the screen, and that's what it's using to represent the movement of your nodes. So now I could hit apply, same thing. I have my center of my O, hold the Shift key, select the outside, basic weld that together, and again, gets me my center of my O's bridged or connected to the outside of the O, but with a different result. And at that state, unless the font was really important to be that style, and I'd have to then modify it a bit to be a tweak of that original font style. I'd probably be better just to use a already bridged font like this stencil. Okay, so some differences right there. If you're looking to have the font be, or the letters be, what is left after you cut out the shape, something that is going to be considered a bridged font would be something that's solid like Arial, whereas something like stencil that's disconnected is considered unbridged. Whereas if we're going to be cutting the text out, that Arial font is going to become unbridged, whereas the stencil font that has those sections connecting the outside and inside of letters already ingrained into the design is going to be your bridged font. So some editing is going to be required. So to finish off this design, I'm just going to recenter this on my workpiece here. We're going to bring in a complex design. So to do this, first thing you need to do is make sure you've gone to Microsoft Teams and you go into the CNC plasma cutting channel and copy the Titan head picture from Teams into your OneDrive. And then you can bring that file in. So I'm going to go here to the Acquire Image menu under File, and then I'm going to choose the Scan and Trace Wizard. And the Scan and Trace Wizard is going to take me through the steps of bringing a complex design that we don't have in clipart into Torchmate so that I can combine it with my design. So I'm going to follow along here, click Next. I do not want to acquire an image from a scanner that's installed. I actually want to browse my computer for an already existing image. So I'm going to choose that option, and then I'm going to go Next. And then I'm going to find my file by clicking on these three dots, or the ellipses here on the right. And then you can find your files here. If you have a computer at home that is automatically connected to OneDrive and you can access your OneDrive, or O Drive is what it'll be likely labeled as on the school computers, that's awesome. If not, you'll need to download that file into your computer documents for your school account, and then you can access that file. So I have a computer where it is accessible to get my OneDrive, so I'm going to go to my OneDrive. I'm going to go to the place where I've put my Titan head picture, Titan head, and it's got my Titan head image here for me, and it shows me that I'm looking at a bitmap. And that's important too, is that this process, this wizard, will work for bitmaps, but it'll also work for JPEGs, TIFFs, and GIFs. I highly recommend do not use GIFs or TIFFs though. They come out very blurry, very pixelated. They don't look very good. JPEGs work awesome, and so do bitmaps. Okay? So the Titan head file that's on Teams is a bitmap, so as long as you have this set to that default, you should find your Titan head. We're going to click on that twice to access that. We're going to click Next. And now this is where we're going to start playing around with our document. So this cursor below the picture is going to allow me to change the effect of how much or how little detail comes through. So first thing I'm going to do is click on that cursor, and if I drag this all the way to the left, it starts to fill in more of my Titan head than maybe I want, and it also makes the edges blurry. If I drag this all the way to the right, eventually my Titan head disappears completely. So it's kind of a happy medium. You got to find the best quality where you have all the details you want, but it doesn't look pixelated or grainy, and you're not losing anything that's important. So usually it's somewhere near the middle is going to be your best option, but sometimes it is a little bit more to the left, sometimes it is a little bit more to the right. Play around with it, find your best results, and that preview will change once you're happy with it. We're going to go Next, Next, without changing any settings, and Apply. And that's going to bring your image in, and you're going to also have a window that will appear. It'll look like this. AccuScan Trace, and it's going to ask if you want to retrace, which just takes you back to the steps here again, where you could then play with some of these settings, but likely it's going to work for you, so I don't think you're going to need to do that, which means you're going to hit Finish, and you're going to have your Titan head, or whatever design you're bringing in other designs, uploaded into your design work area. Now this Titan head has a black fill for the main details, but then all the intricate details are filled in white. Now we want to change that. We don't want to keep that white, because if I start to play around with layer colors, it makes everything that layer color, because this hasn't actually been modified yet to work with. So what I want to do is, with the Titan head selected, go to my weld tools and choose Basic Weld. And it's going to ask if I want to discard the objects that are the same color as the background. So the white areas are the same color as my background area. So that's what's going to be discarded. So that's going to basically remove them or cut them out from the Titan head. So I'm going to hit yes, and now all those white fine detail points now show the grid lines, which means I either have my cutout of the Titan head or I have nothing open. And that's what I want. I'm going to place my Titan head right in the center of my document. So I'm going to use my center node or nub, and I'm going to set this to 6 and 6 for both X and Y. So my Titan head is right in the center. And then I'm simply going to just scale this down. So with my proportional scaling lock closed, I'm going to set my height. I'm going to start with 6 inches and see where that goes. So it's still a little big. I'm going to scale it down a little more. I'm going to take this down maybe to 4 inches. That's probably a little too small, but you can see that I have a gap at the top, whereas I don't have a gap at the bottom. So I'm probably not going to be able to equally space this with the way that my design's been made. So what I might want to do is start looking at dragging the selection boxes with my nodes around to manipulate this so that part of my Titan head is overlapping, but not all of it. The other thing that's important is that these openings, I don't want them to be covered by my frame because I want to get the detail of my Titan head. So I might have to play around a little bit to get to that point. And then I'm just going to recenter this on my x-axis so I know it's centered left to right. And then I'll just simply hit Control A, select everything, basic weld it together. And now my Titan head's connected, and you can see when I drag that off to the side, everything goes with it, which means that this design would be ready to be cut out. And I'm just going to reset my zoom so you can see the entirety of this design. And I could further enhance this if I wanted to. I could take part of the frame out. I'm going to just draw a couple of shapes here. Make these both a black layer color to match my frame. I'll cut one of these out of here. Oop. Apparently I double clicked by mistake. And you can see that once you get into more complex designs here by this happy accident that's occurred, it becomes very complex for it to bring up all the design elements. All those nodes have to be traced out, and this program does take a little bit of time. So bear with it. Don't just start mashing your keyboard or your mouse buttons, because it can take some time depending how far along you are in the complexity of your design. And another important thing is all of this work that we've done here takes a lot of time, and it'd be an awful shame for something to happen and us to lose this work. So I would highly recommend you get into the habit of saving regularly. So I'm just going to XOR weld these squares away here just to create a little bit of an opening. Delete the excess, and then I'm just going to bring up those nodes that I actually was just talking about how long it takes to edit these in. And I'm going to do a really simple method here. I'm going to take this node right at the edge of my high school font, and I'm just going to bump it over to 12 inches on my X, and then delete these lower two. And again, bear with the program. It does take time. We're not denying that fact. But as long as you're patient and you are saving regularly, it can do some really awesome stuff. So I'm just going to do the same process at the bottom, just bumping that node over. I'm going to select these other two nodes. Do the same thing over here on the left side. So I'm going to take my node at the bottom of high for high school, and I'm going to bump that over to 0. Trace the two nodes below it, delete them, and like I said, we're just going to bear with it. We're not looking for super speedy work here. We're going to just have some patience, let it do the tracing, get into the next section here. But what I can do here is, like I said, further design this just to have a little bit more separation, a little more definition between the Titan head and the Shaftesbury High School home of the Titans, so that it stands out as opposed to just a frame like we did with the design. And it just changes the overall design that way. Not one is right or wrong, but this one's just different. Okay? So just like last time, I asked you to follow along and complete one design just like mine. So once you get to this stage here, that's going to be one of your designs working with font. And then I would like you to make your own design. So do your own interpretation. Doesn't have to be Shaftesbury High School, home of the Titans. Maybe it's a sports team that you play on or a sports team that you cheer for. Make sure that the logo that you are working with to bring in with the scan and trace wizard is saved as a bitmap or a JPEG. Again, your Titan head that we worked with here was black and white. I highly recommend black and white logos. So if you don't have the ability to save your logo of desire in black and white, move it into Photoshop, switch it to be a black and white logo, and then bring it in. Okay, folks, that is it for this one. Pitter patter.